Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to this CloudWorld session on cash forecasting. My name is Marc Seewald. I'm a Vice President in EPM Product Management, and I'll be your presenter today. Okay, folks, so first off, before I get into it, just define what I mean by here, cash forecasting and continuous cash liquidity. So first off, this presentation will cover some new capability that's coming to the ERP and EPM cloud. It's kind of interesting. I'll of course elaborate on this as I get into the presentation, but this is a capability that's coming in the next 12 months. It's a joint development between ERP and EPM and really kind of ushers in a new era of how ERP and EPM really works together to solve end-to-end business problems, all the way from transaction out to planning and forecasting, for example, and taking action on issues and challenges around the enterprise. I think this particular feature is very timely. Certainly over the last couple of years with the pandemic, there's been a lot more focus on cash forecasting in general. And then more recently, of course, unfortunately, we're seeing a heightened interest rate environment and questions around where we are going from an economic standpoint. So it's very timely. I think companies that are really best practice around management of cash and cash liquidity are those companies that are going to be best positioned to weather any kind of storm or to take advantage of opportunities as we go forward. So it's great capability, and again, very excited to bring this to you. First off, just a very brief comment. As I mentioned, this is a feature that's coming in the near future, so a quick safe harbor statement. But let's get into a little of the context around cash forecasting. And some of you may not be experts or come from a treasury background, or maybe not even from a finance background. So just to point out the importance of cash forecasting. First off, this comes pretty interesting statistics coming from Forrester, very recent, 2021. Points out that most companies are interested in having a truly holistic cash forecasting. And what does that mean, holistic cash forecasting? I think I'll get into this more as we get into the presentation, but a lot of companies kind of have Band-Aid approaches to forecasting, using spreadsheets and very manual processes and emailing things back and forth. So I think most companies today are interested in automating that and seeing improvements around cash forecasting, and recognize that it's a deficiency within finance today. However, equally as important, you can see there that very few companies feel that they have the systems in place to do that today, 5%. So that's a pretty stark contrast between the finance organizations that are interested in this topic versus the finance organizations who feel they've really mastered it. So with that, another little kind of point of reference as we get into this is that every finance organization can be different. For the most part, cash forecasting is typically owned by treasury departments. But cash forecasting can also be done in FP&A. It can be done in maybe by cash managers, by controllers. But in general, cash forecasting is something that's done in support of the treasury function. So I thought something that would be helpful to set some context here is if you take a look at this treasury function, what are the top priorities for treasury? And you can see them listed here. Again, a very recent study coming out, in this case from IDC in March of 2022. Top 5 priorities, 4 of the top 5 are really highly dependent on cash forecasting. The first 4, so contribute to the bottom line. What does that mean in the context of the cash forecast? That means, hey, are you optimally using cash? If you don't have an accurate cash forecast, you probably have to sit a lot of cash in the businesses just to make sure that you've got enough cash there when you need it, and that cash isn't working for you. So that it's not optimized. It's not maximizing the contribution to the bottom line. Number 2, provide service at the lowest possible cost. Very closely related to it. If you've got underutilized cash, cash sitting around not doing anything, your cost of capital is not going to be optimal. So the cost of the treasury function, or the cost of the finance function, or the cost of the business is not going to be optimal. And third, to the point of strategic advisor to the business. What's this mean? We talk about this a lot in finance, but in the context of treasury, there's a lot that you can learn when you look at procure to pay or order to cash. What are those things that can be really improve the customer experience or improve our ability to reinvest in the business? That's what treasury departments can offer to the enterprise, when things are happening very effectively. And then last but not least is, of course, liquidity risk management, making sure that you have the right cash in the right place at the right time. Again, highly dependent on cash forecasting. So long story short here, folks, cash forecasting is very important. I think most finance organizations are going to be looking for ways to improve on it. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges. Why did we see that disparity between interest in cash forecasting versus the belief of whether you were able to do the cash forecasting effectively? The reason is most organizations today rely heavily on spreadsheets. Typically, it's spreadsheets. There's a cash forecast spreadsheet that's submitted by maybe controllers around the world or cash managers around the world. If you're a multinational business, of course, or if it's controllers or cash managers around the business in general. But it's very manual. It's difficult. It takes a lot of time. And emailing things back and forth, reconciling to make sure that makes sense, trying to connect them to other systems, things of that nature. So very inefficient process. And the problems specifically are listed here on this page. Obviously, to do an effective cash forecast, the source data it sits in a number of different places. It's not just the general ledger. It's different sub-ledgers. It's different places like procurement, different places like tax systems and so forth. So disconnected systems is a challenge. How do you bring that data together? Manual, resource intensive, as I alluded to already. Anytime you rely on spreadsheets, it's a very manual process. Hard to automate that. It tends to be also a lot of risk with that. You have highly valued skill set within finance and around the enterprise, spending lots of time ticking and tying data or entering data into spreadsheets. It's just not optimal. Third point is difficult to really take action. Because cash forecasts in many businesses are only once a month, they might not even spot a problem for 30 days if it happens very early in the month. So, it's hard to take action when you've got such a late notification around where an issue might be occurring. And even once you are aware of where the issue is, gathering all the right stakeholders and gathering all the facts and getting everybody aligned around taking action on that issue might take too long. So you're missing out on opportunity to optimize your cash and to optimize the business. Last but not least is lack of intelligence. I kind of alluded to that in the last point around how can the treasury function help you realize how to better serve your customer, or how to improve the order to cash, or how to improve procure to pay. You don't get that kind of intelligence typically when you're trying to massage data in Excel spreadsheets. So these are the challenges that I think most organizations deal with. I would suspect that if you're familiar with your cash forecasting process, these should resonate with you. Now, if we go on and we kind of further define cash planning or cash forecasting, I know not everybody here in the audience today is certainly an expert in cash forecasting. So you can actually take the broader process of cash planning and break it down into three kind of subcategories. And you can basically break them down into the time horizon by which you plan for. On the left here, you can see cash forecast, or cash positioning, I should call it. Tends to be very tactical. You're only looking out maybe 7 to 10 days, just making sure there's enough money in the bank to pay the bills or to run the business, things of that nature. If the person responsible for this, maybe you do it on a weekly basis, but very tactical in nature. And of course, there is capability in ERP Cloud to do this today. Within our collections and AR capability, we have nice cash positioning. On the far right-hand side, I'll skip over the middle for a moment, but on the far right-hand side, you see long-range cash planning. Now that tends to be much longer time horizon, 1 to 5 years. On some businesses, you could even go out longer, depends on your industry. Tend to not look at this very frequently, maybe on an annual or at best quarterly basis. And it tends to be very strategic. Are we trying to accumulate cash for acquisitions? Or are we trying to accumulate cash to create a war chest to weather the storms or to expand into a new geography? What's the strategy of that? However, in the middle is this cash forecasting area. It really helps kind of optimize cash. It's that time horizon of 3 to 6 months. Maybe it's a 13 week rolling forecast. Typically, as I mentioned, organizations frequently do this on a monthly basis. And as I mentioned, it's really something that's done frequently in Excel spreadsheets. But it helps you make sure that you're not just paying the bills, but are you doing it strategically? Are you doing it in a way that's allowing you to optimize cash and still ensure that you're working with strategic vendors, strategic suppliers, and you're keeping your customers happy and things of that nature. Now, what we're doing here at Oracle is we're really reinventing these first two together. Cash positioning and cash forecasting, and bringing it together. Now, in EPM today, you can do cash forecasting, or in EPM today, you can do long-range cash planning. But really what we're doing here is we're bringing cash positioning and cash forecasting together with all of the data coming from the ERP. So can you generate a daily cash forecast from the transactional details in AR or AP or procurement or orders, which gives you a much better response time and a much more accurate forecast in general to better position the company moving forward. And that's really what leads us to the feature that we're planning to release. This is what we call Oracle Predictive Cash Forecasting. Very excited about this. Again, as mentioned, this will be coming out in the next 12 months. This is, as I introduced in the beginning, it's a joint development between ERP and EPM. So for those customers that are already using these features, you just get this, or using these products, you just get this new predictive cash forecasting. The value proposition for this, you can see here over on the left-hand side. We believe that there's a much better opportunity to deal with problems quicker when you have a daily cash forecast. And this daily cash forecast is enabled by automation. We use things like machine learning to generate predictions directly off the transactional detail, so you don't have to trouble people around the enterprise to manually update a cash forecast every month. So much better problem, finding problems in the business and taking action on them. And that kind of leads into the second point. Not only can you spot these issues faster, but you can actually begin to take corrective actions on them. One of the things that's great is all the transactions are in ERP, and that's really kind of the nuts and the bolts of your business. And maybe your planning and your forecasting as EPM, but we really want to bring that together. So in context, as you're updating your forecast, if you see a problem in a legal entity, or if you need, there's a cash surplus, or there's a cash shortage, in context of the cash forecast, you should be able to take an action. It shouldn't take you, 100 mouse clicks to take that action. You shouldn't have to toggle between different applications or different technologies. You shouldn't have to, involve people that don't necessarily need to be involved in this process to take an action. So that's really what our vision is that not only do we find the issues quicker, but we can take actions on them quicker. Third point is around operational improvements. I alluded to that a couple of times now already, but one of the wonderful things about technology like machine learning, and when you can start connecting data from source systems, you can really start to see patterns. You can spot patterns that maybe aren't obvious to the human eye when you're looking at a spreadsheet, but those patterns can help inform how you can improve the business. Are there things happening in order to cash that can be optimized? Are there things happening in procure to pay that can be optimized, and so forth? So this is quite a significant value proposition, we believe. Also, if you can't already imagine this, if all of these things can be automated, we believe it's a great way to bring efficiencies to finance in general. So if you're in the finance organization and you're looking for a way to take literally hundreds of hours of time out of finance time during the month, this is something that might be of interest to you. Now, let's get a little deeper into this process of cash forecasting so you can help understand a little of the context. First off, liquidity management, in cash forecasting is a team sport. Depending on, again, how your finance organization is organized, typically Treasury would own this cash forecast. But they can't control the business. Treasury doesn't have all the stakeholders rolling up to them. They have to work with different stakeholders around the enterprise to have effective liquidity management. So really the roles or the personas here on the slide really represent kind of the folks that Treasury need to work with to really be effective at what they're doing. And you'll see that, other colleagues within finance, whether it's the controllers organization, whether it's the FP&A, those are the folks that have the best understanding of the cash inflows and the cash outflows. So treasury is highly dependent on them. Likewise, to the right of them, the people involved in receivables, payables, procurement, these people, have jobs to be done, and it's treasury's success is highly dependent on the work that these teams are doing, and allowing treasury to collaborate much more effective with these organizations allows both sides of this relationship to be much more effective. And then last but not least, although the first three kind of roles here that on the screen are, I think are very actively engaged in cash forecasting and liquidity management, another stakeholder that might not be an active participant in cash forecasting is the business. It's the folks like salespeople or people dealing with your suppliers or your partner organizations that care. If you've got a clunky collections process or a process where it's hard to get paid for suppliers, that's obviously not optimal for your business. So the folks that are deeply involved with customers and partners and suppliers, what I'm just terming the business here, are also key stakeholders in this process. And if we take a look at really how we think we can improve cash forecasting, this slide kind of summarizes it. This is meant to be kind of a month in the life of Oracle Predictive Cash Forecasting. A lot of information here on the screen, so I'll take some time to work through it. First off, the value proposition that I've talked about here is obviously daily monitoring of the cash forecast. Instead of waiting 30 days to get the cash forecast spreadsheets, you've got daily updates being delivered to you through machine learning and heuristic models, driver-based planning, things of that nature. So, and it's all being updated based on the latest transactions happening in invoices or orders and so forth. Down below that, number two, you have daily collections. We think through more accurate cash forecasting, we can get better guidance to your collections team to prioritize the customers that they're calling on first. We are making predictions down at an invoice level of detail, cash forecasts at an invoice level of detail, those invoices that are most likely to be paid late or most material, we can help prioritize that. Up in number three, periodic cash reviews and updates. We're not claiming that whoever's involved with putting together a cash forecast, in this case, maybe the controllers, we're not saying that they will never need to touch the cash forecast, but the cash forecast will be significantly automated through the use of machine learning and driver-based planning. So it really changes their role. Instead of spending all kinds of time updating numbers and manually keying numbers into a spreadsheet and emailing it, they're reviewing the cash forecast and they're sanity checking the cash forecast, and they're making maybe an adjustment where maybe they're aware of something that the technology is not. So it really changes the kind of the commitment of time necessary for controllers. Number 4 and number 5 are important. As I alluded to, solving problems. When there's a cash surplus or a cash shortage, you need to take action. So Treasury needs to work with controllers or cash managers around the world to take action. Again, we enable that in context within the software. And then for those issues that might be more material, maybe there's a problem in filling orders, the supply chain is slow. Can you take action to help facilitate some of the issues happening in the supply chain through different cash strategies like supply chain financing, things of that nature. So we really have a vision for allowing Treasury to collaborate with all those stakeholders involved in some of these bigger issues. And then last but not least, as we alluded to, is kind of optimizing the operations. But hopefully that gives you kind of an insight into kind of the, where we think we can add some value. I'll just give you a couple quick views of this. Again, I think something that most Treasury organizations would be very hungry for is, if you can bring all this data together for them, they don't need to go get it themselves. And of course, we can do that with our ERP EPM cloud. The product will have nice dashboards that have all the information that the treasurer needs to do their cash forecasting and evaluate the health of the liquidity management process. Good example of that right here. You can see here also the actual cash forecasting screen. So pre-populated with many of these lines, whether it's your cash inflows, your cash outflows, being auto-generated through either machine learning models or through assumptions around driver-based planning. Also, you'll see that it may not be obvious, but over on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see how we automatically surface insights into the data in your forecast. So again, we're spotting the patterns and the issues in the data. So the controllers and the treasury and the stakeholders around the cash forecast don't have to do that. So that's just a quick whirlwind tour. I'll wrap up the presentation here, just talking a little bit about some of the other kind of maybe benefits you wouldn't fully appreciate, but one of them, as I alluded to, is around collections. So for where you might have delinquent customer payments, this is a nice statistic coming from APQC, very recent here, 2022 again. And it points out that most businesses have a fair amount of cash sitting around due to customer delinquencies. And you can see here, there's a major difference between the 25th percentile and the 75th percentile of the amount of cash delinquencies. So that's a lot of cash just sitting out there not being optimized. The difference between the 25th percentile and the 75th percentile is 40%. You can do the math in your organization. If you could improve customer delinquencies by 40%, that's likely to be a pretty material number. And then likewise, I want to point out that, one of the strategies we have here at Oracle, if you ever see me present on planning, budgeting, and forecasting, for example, it's around really bringing all of the planning and forecasting around the enterprise together. On the left-hand side of the page is really what we see in legacy planning processes, where maybe Group FP&A has a nice planning budgeting software, but the rest of the enterprise are relying on Excel spreadsheets. Really what we're trying to enable here in Oracle is really a connected planning process where everybody's using the same technology, the same assumptions are all in place, everybody's looking at things in the context of what they need to look at it, but it's all consistently managed. So very important. And that really drives to the point here of around, maybe something that's not immediately obvious, but if, what about that collaboration between Treasury and FP&A? This is a pretty interesting statistic, again, coming from APQC, pointing out that most Treasury and FP&A organizations, are still doing either ad hoc coordination or no meaningful partnership. And it points out that for those organizations that for the half of the organizations that do have at least some planned coordination or integrated systems, that they're far more likely to be evaluate themselves as being very effective. So I think that's pretty highlighting, pretty telling there type statistic. Again, I think there's nice synergy by bringing Treasury and FP&A together. That'll kind of lead me to the kind of the final point is really the fact that, our strategy here at Oracle is around connecting people, process, and data to make businesses more agile. We have world-class ERP, world-class EPM, but now with features like predictive cash forecasting and like the other investments we're working on in the roadmap, we're really trying to go much deeper, automating end-to-end business processes like forecasting down at the transactional level, and really allowing finance and operational folks around the business to partner much more closely. So very excited for this feature to come out into the marketplace, and I hope that was a helpful presentation, and I hope that you folks enjoy the rest of your CloudWorld. Thank you very much.